I like the idea of a fish being more intelligent than the men who are taking care of it.
This is the Book of Life. I'm Heidi Estrin. The Yiddish Fish is a quirky picture book written and illustrated by Mexican-born author Santiago Cohen. Oddly, it's based on a true story. I spoke to Santiago by phone at his home in New Jersey. So, Santiago, what is the Yiddish Fish? Explain it.
Well, it started in the year 2000 or 2001 when I saw a story on the New York Times, on the front page of the New York Times. It's supposed to have a fish who talked to a fishmonger, and in Hebrew, I think it's New Jersey, but I put it in Brooklyn. In one hand, I thought it was fascinating, the story, and in another hand, I thought it was funny. I like the idea of a fish being more intelligent than the men who are taking care of it. So I came up with the idea of the fish talking Yiddish because I thought it would be funnier, because Hebrew, I think, is more spoken around the world, and Yiddish is less and less, and I thought it would be more strange for a fish to talk in Yiddish. So I based the book on that story, but I kind of have my liberties of making it all more fantastic. And at the end, the fish, of course, doesn't die. I think on the New York Times they kill the fish, but on my story, it's a hopeful story where the fish gets away.
Okay. Now, besides the use of Yiddish, what makes it a Jewish story? Do you feel that there is something else Jewish about it, a Jewish sensibility?
I think so. I mean, you feel for the fish. Jewish people are very sensitive about life and death, and one of the things that the fish says is the end is near, and Jewish people, we're always, afraid that something might happen. We're always on the edge that a big tragedy might happen, and when nothing happened, it's like, oh, okay, nothing happened. So, I don't know if that makes it more Jewish, but I think that's one aspect. And the other is the humor of it, because I think Jewish people are funny.
Mm-hmm. So in the story, one fish speaks to the fishmongers.
Right.
And then it jumps back into the barrel, and they're not sure which fish it was.
Right.
But at the end of the story, it seems like maybe all the fish are singing klezmer music. So do they actually all speak Yiddish?
Well, I left it a little open. You don't know if they all talked or they imagined. But in my mind, they all could talk, and they just decided not to talk. Or some decide to talk, and some decide not to talk. You can believe that if you believe in a fantastic world.
Okay. At the back of the book, there are activities.
Mm-hmm.
So have you tried any of the activities?
My wife is a scientist.
Ah.
So I thought of it from the scientific point of view. Not to think that a fish can talk, but there are fishes who make sounds. So I created all these scientific experiments that the teachers could do with the kids. And I thought it would be important for the teachers to approach the story not only as a fantastic tale, but to talk to the kids about if they think that animals can communicate. I know like dolphins and whales communicate with sounds, but nobody knows what they're saying. But, I thought it could make a nice science project.
Okay. So I have a question about the illustrations.
Okay.
Why are all the people blue?
Well, that's one way of making it a little unreal. And also, I feel that if I have them blue, they could reach a variety of people that they won't think that it's one race or another. It would be a more general story also. And I think it worked because I went to a public school and they were some African American kids were asking me, why are they blue? And I said, well, I wanted the characters to be related to everybody, not just Jewish people. And they said, well, why don't they have like darker blue and lighter blue? And I said, well, that's not the point. You know, the point is to just be people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it worked or not. But,
okay, interesting. So you've also worked in children's television for the Children's Television Workshop and the Cartoon Network.
Right.
So what's the same and what is different about creating books for children versus creating shows for children?
To make books is very, very elaborate because you have to work a lot on the story. Then you have to do all the drawings one by one. It takes a long, long, long time. I mean, by the time you start a book and you finish it, it can be like 3 years later. It's very, very detailed, and it's almost like seeing a painted wall being dried. And animation, you create the whole concept of the thing. I did a character called Troubles the Cat. They made 24 episodes for the Cartoon Network, and I didn't create the stories, but I designed the characters and the whole look of the program. And I was giving input of how to solve the problems, and I did some of the storyboards. So for me, it was a lot more interesting to do the animation because I was almost like creating a world that these people lived in. I had to design like every single thing that they touched. For instance, there's a story where they have pets. They had to design the dogs and the fishes, and then if they go in costumes, I had to design all the costumes and design the place where they're going to parade with the costumes. So it was like creating the whole world where they lived. I invented a whole new language, I guess.
What do you mean you invented a whole language?
I mean, when I did that series, I don't think there was anything like it on TV. I felt like I was God creating these creatures, almost. It's much more rewarding, I guess, the animation.
It's more rewarding than writing books?
Well, in the sense that you see the animation much faster. It's not done by one single person. They have like 40 people working on the animation, and you could see right away all the stories, animated. So it's much faster, the reward. The whole process is very, very interesting because it's like a group effort, and children's books is more like individual. So you're more isolated.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything you would like to talk about that I did not think to ask you?
Well, I'm also an artist. I paint and I do all kinds of creative stuff. I was involved, for instance, in Day of the Dead parade in my neighborhood. Since I'm from Mexico, I was folk art exposed at a very young age, and I love the funny dead figures that they use in all the handcrafts and stuff. So I worked here in Jersey City doing giant puppets with that kind of figures, and I like doing all sorts of things that are creative like that. It's not necessarily very Jewish, but I think I put my Jewish little salt on everything I do.
Santiago Cohen, thanks so much for speaking with us.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
If you enjoy the Book of Life podcast, please become a patron at patreon.com/bookoflife. Leave a review on iTunes or a comment on our blog at bookoflifepodcast.com. You can also like our page at facebook.com/bookoflifepodcast. Follow us at twitter.com/bookoflifepod. Email us at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 561-206-2473. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida at cbiboca.org and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.